Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name is Mhaisekar, and I'm the consultant at a Dutch company called Topcore. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to build an effective technical slide deck. Now, I say this is a technical, the session is for a technical slide deck, but that's not really limited to the technical slide deck. It actually applies to all the slide decks, right? So even if it's technical, non-technical, does not matter. The principle of the everything of the content that I'm going to tell you remains largely the same. Also, a little bit of catch about this is I'm not actually here to tell you about how to build a technical slide deck in minutes. I'm actually here to tell you maybe you should take your time instead, right? Because a lot of the people I see, including myself, not too long ago, they keep the slide deck until the very last moment, but it is actually not a great idea, depending on especially depending on the circumstances, right? So if it is a conference, a technical conference, depending on whether or not it's a meeting, maybe it could be an internal meeting with your stakeholders or customers, or it could be a webinar with external attendees. That's absolutely okay, but in all of those conditions, at least start putting some content in your slide deck from the moment that you know that, okay, this is the topic that I need to present to this audience. It is important to know your audience, and which I will talk extensively about more. But once you know that, okay, this is the setting, this is the stage, this is the audience, and this is the topic that I want to present, make sure you open up your PowerPoint slide and start making a deck. Now, having said that, the initial deck, the draft V1 deck, does not have to be the finally finished and furnished version. That is absolutely okay. But at least you need to start skeletonizing the deck, as I like to say. At least put the organs in, start putting the bones in, and then you can start building the muscles and the tendons and the joints, right? At least start putting some draft points and bullet points. Write some notes or comments in the slide, in the note section. If you're like, okay, this is going to be the title of this slide, and this is what things that I'm going to talk about when I talk about this slide. So that is extremely important. So you know you are prepared. So you know that you are not missing out on any important details, because we all know hindsight is 10 out of 10. After the fact, after you're done with the presentation, then you start remembering things. Oh, I wish I could have told or said something more about this, or oh, I forgot talking about this. Or oh, maybe I spent a little too much time on this particular bullet point. Instead, I should have spent more time on other topics, right? So these things, if you plan them out beforehand, tend to not happen that much. So your content is more focused, and more straight to the line. Of course, so I'm going to talk more about this in details. So let's get straight into it. Before I tell you, before we get into content, let me tell a little bit about why am I qualified for this, or why do I feel like I'm qualified. Um, it also doubles as the target audience, or the people who are more outspoken, who have the possibility to engage with the customers in different manners, like the consultants here, say, for example. They tend to be very technically engaged with, say, the other consultants or the customers or the managers or anyone who's making the technical decision in the organization, right? So consultants tend to be more technical. Now, of course, it depends on what kind of consultants they are, but um, I mean, more often than not, they're technical IT consultants, and they tend to be more technical about things. Um, there's also tech evangelists. Tech evangelists are the people who go out and in the real world, in the wild, let's say, and they collect feedback. They're often called the bridge between multiple organizations between your own company. So they talk to customers. They also talk to the marketing team. They also talk to the sales team. They may also talk to the engineering and help them prioritize based on their experience from the field. they go talk to the engineering and say, hey, this is the feature or this is the bug that we have been talking or we've been hearing a lot about from our customers, or the general consensus is that, okay, this feature should be more prioritized. So please, can you make sure that you work on this a little bit more, right? So, or if you please address this bug in the next release. So that kind of things. Again, these evangelist kind of jobs roles also tend to be diversified in the sense that they talk to customers who are not only technical but also come from management background. They also tend to come from a semi-technical, right? So there's also a field or an organization, or when I say organization, I mean the department called technical marketing as well, right? So these are the people who market the product, but in technical sense, right? In a way that they create demos, they update the website with the relevant content. They go out in the wild and they talk to the customers and tell them why their solutions are the best for their needs. Customer success engineers are also well, the name suggests what this engineer does, right? So they actually go talk to the customers and make sure that the customer is using the product to the fullest, right? So the relationship with your customer does not end with you selling them the product. It actually starts from there, right? So once you have sold them the product, you have to make sure that using the product correctly. You have to make sure that they are not missing out on any feature, they're not underusing any features, or they are not using a feature that it is not intended to be. So this is the kind of consultation that customer success engineers gives to the customers, that they tend to engage technically or semi-technically with customers, the clients, the managers, the decision makers, the consumers, the users, right? Then there's pre-sales. They engage a bit more technically than sales with other customers as well. Right? So these pre-sales deal more with potential customers, right? So this is different from sales, like the core sales. Pre-sales team actually go out to the customer and set the demos and answer the technical questions on a high level. Of course, now that they don't have to go into too much details into engineering of the product, but at least how the product works and what kind of requirements it satisfies and what is the design of the product and so on. Again, these discussions also tend to be technical, non-technical, and pre-sales also tends to work a little bit more with the managers. Not pre-sales also tend to have a little bit of introductory conversations with all kinds of audience. So I have actually gone through all of these positions in the course of my career. So I've been an evangelist, consultant, an engineer, a customer success engineer, and in pre-sales. So I over the years, I have, from my experience, have understood a few things. Is like all audience is not the same. You have to be very careful about your messaging, or who you have to always keep in mind who you're talking to, and then you have to kind of bend your messaging a little bit so that it suits the other person well. And I very comparatively recently started speaking publicly about 2 years ago. Now, most of that has been online because I picked up this, let's say, hobby of public speaking in the COVID period. And of course, as you know, there was no physical conferences going on in COVID. So it was all webinars and online, online presentations. Nowadays, the world has started to open up a bit more, so the offline conference is also starting. So now after that, I've got a little more opportunities to go out and actually go in person, talk to or deliver a session and talk to other attendees. Again, depending on what kind of meeting that you have or the kind of personas that you're meeting in your conference or in your internal meetings or whatever, you have to phrase your questions or your answers accordingly, right? So this is why I put this slide here, just to gauge the personas or to set up the target audience. So this was pretty much my first online presentation. As you can imagine, I was fumbling a lot. I was at loss of words for a lot of times. Again, that still happens to me sometimes, but over the course of time, it tends to fade away or it tends to get better and better. But this was absolutely my first online presentation. I remember I was literally sweating and I was very nervous. even if I was sitting behind the screen, it kind of feels like a shield, let's say, but it is still nerve-wracking, right? So for the first time, it is, you know that people are probably looking at you if you've got your camera on, and you have to be absolutely perfect in what you're saying. Yes, as a speaker, that you have some, some certain set of expectations from you, and that tends to be a lot in the beginning. But again, like I said, as the time passes on, you kind of get used to it. And I feel it is absolutely okay, even if it's your first presentation. It is okay to feel that. There is no shame into, if you think that you butchered your first presentation, that's absolutely fine, because I think so as well. But what matters is you don't drop the feeling, or you don't stop doing it further. You have to actually conquer the fear, right? So once you've gotten over the fear, then you will kind of pick up that hobby, and then you will get addicted to public speaking in a way. Now, there were some certain things that I learned from my first online presentation. Um, and the most important is this, although a formal attire may not be required, wash up your face and sit straight up anyway. Now, I say that because even if you don't completely dress up in a suit and a boot and the whole professional attire, that's okay. You can wear a t-shirt like I am, but dress up, right? And yeah, and yes, I am wearing pants for those of you who are wondering. Although it is not required, you cannot see what's going on, under my chest, but still dress up a little more formally anyway, because that boosts your confidence. That makes you think that you are prepared. So wash up your face and sit straight up anyway. Don't slack off. Don't sit on a bed and keep your laptop, on your chest and give a presentation like that, because those things matter a lot. They boost your confidence when you feel confident, you feel prepared. You can have notes per slide on the side screen, so that is a good thing about the most convenient thing I would say about online presentations is that you've got a notes. So if you know that there's a feature in PowerPoint called notes, so you can actually write notes per slide in at the bottom, and then you have them on the screen separately, so that you can actually go either refer to that screen from time to time to keep you on your topic, or I've seen a lot of people also write the whole script in the notes and they just go and read it in front of the camera. Now, that can be a good and bad thing, depending on the circumstances. It is good if, okay, it can pass off. If, if the camera is off, and you are not reading the notes in a monotonous way, right? So you are not reading it out of the page exactly as it is, because it can get the other person will know, right? So if you're reading from a slide or from the notes, you're reading the whole sentences without fumbling or extremely smoothly, then people are going to notice, like, oh, this guy is talking a bit too smoothly for someone who is talking candidly, right? So they tend to, I say catch you, but they tend to understand, okay, this person is probably reading off of the script. Having said that, that can also be a good thing if you keep some things in the mind. It's like, even if you are reading from the notes, and this will come to you, eventually as you do more and more of these, is even if you're reading from the notes, don't make it feel like you're reading from the notes. If your camera is off, your slide, and you want your slide deck to be repeatable, right? So if you want the same exact message to be delivered to everybody, as you go and do more presentations to different audience, that is okay to have a script, because you can then just go through the script and you can make sure that you have included everything in the script and you read out from the script. Again, just keep in mind that it doesn't feel like you're reading from the notes. Try to modulate your voice a little bit so that the other person thinks, okay, this may be an actual person speaking out of their out of their free mind, let's say, instead of reading from the notes. Now keep this in mind. This can lead to certain embarrassing situations. You can probably tell that I've learned this the hard way. And a lot of people have, actually, right? So share the window, not the screen. When you are sharing in a presentation, when you need to share your screen, make sure you are sharing the window, not the whole screen, right? So if you're not aware, in Microsoft Teams even, right? So there's an option when you share screen. There are options. You can either select the whole screen or you can select a particular window. Now this, for example, I've only selected the PowerPoint presentation window that I have open here. So even if I overlay another window on top of this window, that window will not be visible to you. You will still keep seeing the PowerPoint window, right? This can be a lifesaver because this, again, like I said, this can lead to embarrassing situations, because if you're not careful and if you are switching slides or if you are switching the windows when you're on a live presentation, people can see everything that is on your screen. It can be an embarrassing wallpaper. It can be certain programs or images that you know put up on your desktop that not everybody needs to see, right? Or there can be some personal or private messages, right? So that could be some security breaches there also, right? So if you've got usernames or if you've got logins to some other screens in the background, right? So people can see your credentials, they can see your screens, they can sorry, they can see your messages even, right? So make sure you're not sharing the whole screen. Also clean unnecessary apps, windows, and processes that are running in the background, right? So if you're giving a presentation, only keep the presentation window open, close everything else. Because again, like I said, if some other message pops up on top of your screen, that it may lead to some embarrassing situations there. Goes without saying, I guess, find a quiet place, close the door. If you are giving from a work professional setting, then good, go find a conference room, shut the door, obviously. But if you're presenting from a home setting, like I am currently, make sure that you've got the door of your room locked, because there may be other people also sitting in your house, right? So you don't want them barging in the middle of your presentation and break the concentration both for you and your audience. Make sure your devices are fully charged. Again, if you are living in an area or a region where electricity is not the most reliable, like say, for example, here where I live in India, so electricity goes off all the time. So make sure your devices are fully charged, so at least you can get through the presentation, or you can hang on long enough for the electricity to be back and your device will start charging again. Also, try to connect to a reliable internet connection. Exactly like I said, if the electricity goes off, your Wi-Fi turns off, then you are left disconnecting from your meeting, right? So that is a break of flow for also you and your audience. So make sure you're connected to a reliable internet connection that is preferably not dependent on the electricity. But what I tend to do is I keep another Wi-Fi, my hotspot from my mobile phone, say for example, connected also to my laptop. So if the router turns off due to electricity, then it picks up my other internet. So that was for the online. This was also my first offline presentation, was equally, I would say, bad, or equally nervous. As a matter of fact, actually, I was a lot more nervous when I was doing an offline presentation, because as you can imagine, you actually go and face your audience, and it can be a little intimidating again. So, standing on a stage, delivering something, knowing full well that people may judge you based on not only your content but also your appearance, it can be a little intimidating in the beginning, right? So again, you will find yourself quickly finding words or fumbling for words, fumbling for thoughts. But again, it is absolutely okay. There is no shame in doing that. That's okay. The thing is, just keep pushing on. There was also some lesson learned in my first offline presentation. Obviously, the first one goes dress appropriately, right? So now people can actually see you whether or not you've got your pants on. So hopefully put your pants on when you're going to an offline presentation for sure. So dress appropriately, though you don't need to dress, you don't need to be overdressed or underdressed, just the perfect right amount, right? So if it's a business meeting, if you are a business person, if you are standard attire, or the attire of the audience is supposed to be suits, okay, go wear suits. But if you are on a technical conference, a community conference, say for example, you can show up in a t-shirt. Of course, not too flashy. The t-shirt should not have any inappropriate content on it. Let's say can be a simple t-shirt or a monochrome, simple single color t-shirt. You can also and a jeans underneath. That is absolutely okay. But this, according to the situation and according to the audience that you will be talking to. Use the stage as much as you can. If you are on a podium with a fixed mic, unfortunately, you cannot move a lot. But if they've given you a mic, a collar mic or a handheld mic that you can go and hold in your hand and still walk, make sure that you're covering the entirety of the stage, at least most 70–80% of the stage at least, right? Because again, if imagine listening to a person that is talking very monotonously without moving at all, then you're either going to fall asleep or you're going to zone out real quick, right? That tends to happen. A lot of new speakers, especially, they again, by the fear of being judged by their body language, they tend to kind of hide behind the podium so that they feel a little bit secure in their little box, and then they deliver the session from there. But if you can, make the note of moving and covering through the whole stage if you can. Use a remote slide changer, that as I am doing exactly right now. So I'm not clicking the buttons on my keyboard. I've got this clicker. I call it a clicker. Okay, I don't know what the official name of it, but I call it a clicker because it clicks. So it's got previous and next options, so you can change slides pretty quickly from a remotely, right? So you don't have to be next to your keyboard, or you don't have anyone sitting next to your keyboard while you tell them to change slides and then they change slides for you. You can actually change your own slides, so you can go by your own pace. Always use a remote slide changer. If you don't get one provided by the venue, a lot of the venues do have clickers, but if they don't, then buy your own and make sure you carry it. Make sure not to stand between the screen and a projector. Now, this is rather obvious, I guess, because if you're moving through the stage, again, there is a chance that you will stop in the middle of the screen, probably sometimes, or unfortunately in exactly in front of the projector. That is going to obscure the view for your audience, and they won't be able to see anything on the screen, obviously, right? So make a note not to stand directly in front of the projector. Try not to fix it on a particular side or person or a group of people. Again, so if you, the trick is you have to keep moving and you have to keep your eyes moving as well, right? Because if you keep fixating on one single person or a group of persons, then the chances are the rest of the persons, rest of the people are going to feel disconnected, because they feel like they are only, you're having a conversation with only between you and that group of people, but not essentially with themselves. So they tend to zone out a lot. Make eye contacts with as many people as you can, then you will also understand who is more keenly interested into listening to you, and who are the people who are not really connected with you as much. Then you can probably change the tone. You can gauge the mood of the audience, and guess, like, maybe I'm getting a little too technical, or maybe I'm not getting technical enough. So you can read the audience faces that way as well, right? So try not to fix it on a particular side of the stage, that is, or a group of people. Keep an open body language. Again, don't stand there stiff in an attentive position. Open up your arms, wave them, use them, point to things using your arms. Keep your palms open, right? Don't keep them fist, in a fist like this. Again, these are all body language things. Subconsciously, people tend to attract more to people who display a little more open body language, right? So that feels a little more inviting for them. Now, this is the key to your presentation. Absolutely, that is to know your audience. You need to identify who are the personas in your audience, right? So if it's an internal meeting, you probably know who the audience is going to be, because the meeting will be scheduled only for a group of people, right? So excuse me, it will either only be focused, or only the technical people would be invited, or it could be only the managers would be invited, or a higher management or C-level executives will be invited. But if you don't know the audience, which is often the case when you go to a conference, say for example, or a community conference that spans across technologies, you don't necessarily know who the persona is in the audience. So you have to first set up the expectations from your presentation, and you also set up the expectation what the audience are expecting from you, right? So if you're going to more of a catch-all kind of multiple technology conference, then make sure that your content is more high level, because again, not a lot of people, you don't know whether or not anybody has even heard of your technology, right? You may be an expert in it, there may be some other people who are experts in it, but you want to cater to as many people as you can from the audience, right? So you keep it high level. If it's more technical focused conference for say like only Azure or only Kubernetes or only development, then you can go assume a bit of a bit of the knowledge from the audience, saying, okay, these are all tech people. I don't need to start from the beginning. Yeah, large and small is also something I want to touch upon. Rather interestingly, you would think that it is more difficult to present to a larger audience than a smaller audience, but from my experience, trust me, a smaller audience can be much more intimidating, in the sense that a smaller audience tend to be invite only, or they tend to be a more focused group of people. So let's say there are only 20-30 people. The chances of you having individual connect with each of them are going to be higher than say in an audience of 300 people, right? So since this is a very focused audience, um, you have to make sure that you're including everybody from the audience, right? And if it's a technical discussion, then you have to be, absolutely confident about what you're going to say, because the chances are the audience is also equally technical. And if you say some wrong thing, or if you give them some kind of misinformation, the chances are that you are going to be caught much quicker than you would get in a larger conference, right? So smaller conferences are actually a bit more intimidating than the larger conferences. Level of expertise, again, like I said, if it's a large audience, then you are an audience that you don't know the level of expertise that they have on the topic that you're presenting. So if you're presenting on, say, something like hybrid cloud, there may be some people who are very familiar with hybrid cloud. There may be some people who have only barely heard of it, or there may be some people who haven't heard of hybrid cloud at all. So you have to select your content based on uh, considering these factors, and keep it very high level, so that everyone who is tech or who is not tech, who have heard of this technology, may or may not be an expert in it, right? So you still need to be able to meaningfully talk to them. Use a language that examples that resonate with them, right? So if you are in a group of very experienced consultants, let's say, for example, then you can go more into real world examples, more complex examples. But if you are in a world of, if you're in a company of, let's say, college graduates, freshers who have just started their careers in IT, then you have to keep the language a bit more, simple, a bit more elaborative, because you don't know what or how much the other person might know, right? So you have to keep a language and example that resonate with the audience. Now start with a strong intro about the topic, not yourself, right? Keep your personal intro short. Only what the audience needs to know. Now, some of you may be thinking that, yes, I see that here, keep your personal intro short, but then there was a whole slide about me in the beginning. The reason, again, why I kept that slide was to set expectations from me for the audience, right? So these are the things that I've experienced myself. These are the roles that I've gone through, and this is the experience that I have. And based on that, I'm going to, since the topic is in line with that experience, this is what I'm going to tell you, right? I've seen some speakers keeping very long introduction slides about about 3 slides. That's all the awards that they have received, all the certifications they've done, or all they're saying like, oh, I'm a great father, and then they have a slide for their dogs, right? And they have slides or these are my hobbies. Like, okay, so most often they're not. Keep in mind that people are here to listen to you talk about a topic. They're not here to talk about you in particular, right? So you are the speaker, but they're here, they care more about the topic. Use catchy titles if you can, especially if you are in a conference setting. Use catchy titles because you are essentially, you may be competing for viewers or competing for audience with other speakers, right? Because in a lot of conferences, there tend to be multiple tracks going at the same time. So there will be parallel sessions going as your session, right? But you need to draw more audience to your session. It is no fun presenting in front of 10 people, right? So you need at least 50, the crowd of 50 people, 50, 60 people to have a good experience. So if you try to pick titles that play a little more with the curiosity of the audience, um, rather than keeping them very technical and kind of strict and mundane. Um, Having said that, be careful, be aware of the audience, the topic, and the setting. Again, if you are in an internal webinar or if you are talking to your superiors, your C-level audience, you don't need to use catchy titles, right? Or you should not use catchy titles. Because a lot of the times, depending on the context, right? So it's all about the context, the agenda of the meeting. If the meeting is supposed to be very serious and you have like a goofy title to your presentation, then that is not going to work, right? So that is going to probably have the reverse effect of people are going to not take you seriously. So be careful in what setting you are and what is the audience. Again, purpose of the presentation, key points that you will cover, say that in the beginning. If you remember in the beginning, before we started this slide, I told you a little bit about myself, and I also told you why I'm eligible to talk about this and what is that we're going to talk about. Right, so just key points that you will be covering. You don't need to, of course, you have detailed slides going on once you start the deck, but at least in the beginning, give them the highlights that this is the agenda of today's presentation. So if this, because a lot of people may want to leave, honestly, because if they feel like this is not the right topic for me, they may want to leave, and maybe if they're in a conference, go to a different track and attend a different session. Or if you have an audience that is not necessarily interested in what you're presenting, it's probably only going to end up detracting the whole session, right? So if some people who are not interested in your topic want to leave, let them leave, right? Because that is good for your session and good for your focused audience. Watching is better than listening, and listening is better than reading. So you probably experience this yourself, right? So you don't need me to tell you that. The watching is probably the most that you retain the content if you watch it rather than listening it, rather than reading it. Keep the context on the slides to absolute minimum. If you've been noticing in my previous slides, I have kept only short bullet points, and I talk to elaborate more on each of those slides. So each of those points. Because if you write everything in long sentences on the slide itself, then people tend to read what's on the slide and not necessarily what the speaker is going to say, right? And it is, of course, it is not a good practice to write everything on the slide and just read it from the slide. Don't do it. Just on the slide, keep a small bullet point and then elaborate on your own on that particular bullet point. Use more visual examples, illustrations, diagrams, or graphs if you can. Again, graphs, diagrams, illustrations are a way to consume a lot of information in short time, right? So instead of 10 sentences, if you just show me one diagram or one graph, I'm probably going to understand more than I would do than just listening to you, right? So if you have examples that are more visual or illustrations or diagrams, graphs, nothing like it, add them. Again, the rule of thumb about everything is don't overdo it. Don't overdo anything, right? So keep everything, sprinkle everything in the right amount. Consider using transitions and animations. Again, this becomes important if you want to have a focused conversation. with your customers or with your audience rather, right? So again, I am talking to you by animating each bullet point. Excuse me, each bullet point, right? So I click it and the next point comes. Instead, if I had all whole 4, 3, 4, 5 points all on the slide, again, you'll probably just go read through the slide and not listen to what I'm saying. But again, it comes with a warning, don't overdo it. There are some wacky transitions and animations in PowerPoint. Try not to use them, especially the transitions. Transitions are when you move from a slide to slide, and animation is more on the content within the slide, right? So from transition, if you're like flipping the slide or flipping it upside down or right side up, and then you're doing some, weird, wacky stuff with transitions, then that puts people off, especially in a professional setting. So please don't overdo it. Choose your transitions and animations very carefully. Now, this is a learning pyramid, as they call it. As you can quickly look through, the image here is like lecture is, so these are all the modes of learning. These are the modes of consumption of information, right? So if you listen to a lecture or if you attend to a lecture, you will probably gain or retain 5% of what was being said. If you are reading, if you read it about something yourself, then you'd probably retain a little bit more. If you see them and hear, see the content and hear the content, you'll probably retain a bit more. Demonstration, if somebody showed to you how something works, then it's probably you're going to retain a little bit more, and so on, right? Now, while I mostly agree with the flow of this learning modes here, keep in mind, and just for your information, that these numbers are not accurate. This pyramid has been quote unquote debunked in the way that these numbers don't necessarily represent exactly the amount of information that you retain, because if you read it and you probably retain 50%, or you may be retaining 15%, doesn't matter, right? The numbers are not numbers do not matter. What matters is the flow. I think most of you would agree that this is how down the line, if you go through these modes, teaching others is probably the best way to learn yourself, right? Keep the content focused. Again, there have been some incidents where speakers go off on a tangent. So this is where the notes or bullet points play an important role, right? So they drag you back to the original agenda of discussion, right? So because it often happens that somebody asks a question and the speaker addresses that question, and then it kind of starts a dialogue between the two of them, and then the discussion goes off on a tangent. If the other audience does not relate to what the question is, then the chances are they are going to zone out. So avoid going off on tangents, give a very brief answer if you need to, or it also happens a lot of times that you may already have a slide that addresses this problem in a little more detail, where the question asker will automatically get their answer. So you don't need to explain it twice. You don't have to answer that question twice. So don't hesitate to tell. Please hold off your question. There is an upcoming slide where I'm going to address exactly this. Stick to a clear and concise language to convey the idea, right? So whatever your topic of presentation is, keep it concise, keep it clear. As again a disclaimer, always remember, more words does not mean a better explanation, right? Because again, this is one of the things that I guess a lot of people think that if they answer the question in a very wordy manner, then that is somehow a better answer to that question. Absolutely not. A short, concise, precise answer can be much more effective than a larger, longer, wordier explanation, right? So keep your answer or you keep your content concise and always stick to the presentation. Organize your content in a logical sequence. Again, as you are changing slides, so make sure from from slide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to whatever 10, 11, 15, right? Make sure that you're going through the flow. It should be in the flow of communication, right? It should be one thing connected well to the next, right? So where you stop on previous slide, next slide should pick up from there. So it should feel like a flawless flow. Instead of just, you talk about this first and then you give some examples and then you all of a sudden show some summary data, say for example, and then all of a sudden you go back to the topic that you left off. That is a very disconnected experience, right? So make sure that you've aligned your presentation to use a flawless flow. Now try to use real examples, use cases, or analogies. So this one that we've already talked about, make sure the examples are relevant to the audience, right? So based on the target audiences who is present, make sure your examples resonate with them. Now, if you use real world, practical, achievable examples, that leaves much more impact than just hypothetical examples or hypothetical scenarios. Now, granted that you may not always have the real world example, but if you do, please make sure that you're using the real world example, right? So even if you have some case studies or success stories from the past or real life incidents that happened with you, make sure that you say that. Of course, you have to not disclose the specifics of the client or the name of the client or any confidential data, but you can say that, okay, it's actually maybe somebody asks you a question, then you say, good question. Let me give you an example from the past. So in my previous employment, then I was working with a customer, and then this situation popped in, and this is how we solved it, right? So these things actually convey the message more convincingly because the other person thinks, hey, okay, it's actually the advice this person gave actually solved a problem. Instead of just creating an hypothetical scenario and then solving that hypothetical question, it shows that you've already solved a real world question. And so that becomes a little more convincing to the other person. Again, same thing, give relatable, familiar analogies to explain complex ideas. So examples are a little different than analogies. Examples are, when you have a specific, let's say somebody asks you a question, and you give them an answer, and then you give them more similar examples, right? So this is what we did. Also, another customer, another scenario, this is also something that we did. This is also something that we did. So these are examples. Analogies are basically comparing one situation to a simpler another situation, say, for example, right? So if you're explaining some complex idea, but then you have, you know what, I can probably tell you the same thing using a much easier, like day-to-day daily life objects. So instead of Azure, think of Azure as an apple, right? Something like that. Now that is not an example, that's an analogy, right? So I don't know in which cases you would compare Azure to an apple, but you get my idea, right? So give analogies that that explain a complex idea. Now at the towards the end, I have some random other tips that I've experienced myself. Use fonts, colors, transitions, and backgrounds that are easier on the eyes, right? So you see that first font that I've used there, and the color, it is very creative, and maybe it looks nice on the title font there. But imagine if I had my entire presentation in that font and in that color, right? That is not easy on the eyes. So people are, again, they're not going to want to look at your presentation, and they may want to look into their phone instead, right? So you don't want that to happen. So keep the attention on the slides. So keep the fonts, colors, transitions, animations, images that are easy on the eyes. Designer ideas, again, if you are working on the presentation on PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint, then there is a tab called Designer. So if you go there, it will actually give you some design ideas for that particular slide. So make sure that, I'm sure you would agree that now this theme that I've used here is very simple, again, very easy on the eyes. The colors are very minimalistic. But there are also some designer ideas that you can use much more impressively, much more effectively when you are presenting something, right? So make sure that you're using designer ideas. Shapes, bullet points, easy to consume, right? So write your bullet points, or write your content, write your pointers in a way that is easy to read, easy to understand, right? Again, doesn't have to be the whole sentences, grammatically correct whole sentences. It can be the abstract of what you're going to talk about, but make sure that the wording is easy. And if you can use shapes in some way that you can arrows, maybe if you wanted to point to something on a diagram or a graph, if you wanted to have some specific shapes going, pointing towards something, then yes, that also helps a lot. Keep supporting material handy in the background. So if you're planning to show them a demo, say, for example, a lot of technical conferences or a lot of technical meetings, let's say, tend to have a combination of slide deck and a demo. So keep your demo open in the background already, right? So you don't have to go and log in front of everybody and then everybody just sits there while you are typing your username and password and then waiting for the website to load or whatever, right? So you already keep it open in the background, and it's just a matter of switching the window at that point, right? So just keep your supporting material at hand anytime that you need it. Now, lastly, don't hesitate to, I'll get back to you later, because this is one of the things that tends to happen a lot, actually. It could be with a couple of reasons. Now, you can, if somebody asks you a question, you can, if you know the answer, then you can give them a short answer, and then ask them to, okay, please, if you want to know more, this is stopping the flow of my, flow of my presentation. So I'll give you a short answer now. But if you want to have a longer answer, then please come back to me later, or I'll come back to you later, whatever. Right? Or even if you don't know the answer to the question, that is absolutely okay. Not everybody knows everything, right? So that's absolutely fine. Tell them, you know what, I admit it that this is not something that I've done in my life so far. So I'll do a bit more research on this and I'll get back to you later. So that is absolutely okay. There is no shame in accepting that you don't know anything. So that is absolutely fine. Again, thank you so much. That's all for now. That is the QR code to my LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, please just scan it and it will take you to my LinkedIn profile. Thank you again for joining this session, and I hope you found it helpful. Again, if you have any questions, please write me all the questions. I'll get back to you later. Thank you.